So again, I am Michael Sunleitner for the recording. This is the course Gandhi and King, Soul Force and Social Change. It's an international online course where we have some 35 people at least registered from over 12 countries. And for me, this is an extraordinarily wonderful learning opportunity for myself, but I hope for others as well. Yesterday, we had a guest, most magazine in the world relating to Gandhi studies, MS John. And today we have a focus on Gandhi's impact through history. Tomorrow we have Gandhi's legacy in India and beyond. Perhaps these two sessions should have been switched in terms of their order, but I will not switch things now because that is just confusing. We don't need more Trump chaos and confusion. I will not contribute to it, at least where I can avoid doing so. For those of you who are present today, remember I am hoping that we will have some turning in of reflections by the end of the day on Monday. We have had, I guess it would be now, I've lost track. We've had about 13 sessions. I don't know which, this is maybe session 14. And yes. We are almost finished with the Gandhi portion of the course. Next week, beginning next Thursday, we will start with Martin Luther King. So your reflections relating to the 15 sessions that have begun the course would be most appreciated if possible on Monday. Please communicate if you have any confusion about this. It is meant to be a fairly simple assignment, that is about one paragraph for each session that you may have attended, either in person or by viewing it on the recording online. Let's imagine that someone has either seen or been present at 10 of the 15 sessions. Then what I would be looking for on Monday is about 10 paragraphs, perhaps 3 to 4 pages. That's not an awful lot to ask. Each one of the short paragraphs would include the session number, the title of the session, like today it is Gandhi's Impact Through History, and some opinion or thought that you have relating to that session. Not repeating the content, but something that you think was particularly good or not so good, perhaps even a question that you have not yet had answered. But some short paragraph, even on one, helpful for us to be aware of as we move into the future. So try to get those in if you can. I'd be greatly pleased. In a short moment, I will begin looking at Gandhi's impact through history. We will be having time for discussion, of course, at any time you like, because you can interrupt me if you like, and we can talk about, for example, the Green Movement and its 4 pillars. If those are confusing, we can talk about that. But in any case, I would like us to flow with your interest. Is there anything from our previous sessions that you would find desirable to continue to clarify? I'm open to your thoughts.
Can I ask something?
Of course.
Please, about the names Satyagraha and Karma. Is it Indian words and we have the meaning of it in English, or he invented that? from a culture or whatever?
Well, karma is basically the concept of cause and effect. For everything that is there is, it has been caused by something. It is the concept that you reap what you sow. As a farmer, if you plant apple seeds, you get an apple tree. If you plant democracy, you get democracy. It assumes the idea of a relationship of means to ends, that the means justify the end. The end does not justify the means.
Well, sir,
That's,
that's clear, but I want to know the terms used.
well, the
Karma.
karma is simply that. It is cause and effect.
Yes, but the term, is it Indian language or some culture or whatever? The terms used.
Well, it is that is in Hinduism, yes, but it is the concept is present in every major religion.
Of
The
course.
word karma is
Mm.
Indian.
Okay.
To answer your question,
Other
and the
Karma
terms
word
are
literally means action. It is in
uh-huh.
Hindi, it is in Sanskrit. But law of karma and karma is different. If you are looking at the literal meaning, karma means action. That is in my mother tongue, also in Sanskrit, karma. From that karma comes, it is used as karma. Karma means action.
But every action has an impact.
Yes, that
And
the
so,
law
yeah,
tells.
and
Your
that's the
negative,
law
your
of karma.
negative actions and your positive actions.
I thank you for that question. And Sibi, I certainly thank you for knowing your mother tongue.
Yes.
Indeed.
No, Hindi
Such
is not my mother tongue. My mother tongue is Malayalam. That is
yes,
closely linked to Sanskrit. Therefore, no, we are familiar with the roots. Many of
very
the
good.
words either has Sanskrit origin or Urdu origin. Many of the words which are used in Hindi either has Sanskrit or Urdu connotations. But Sanskrit one we can easily follow. Some of the words we use in my mother tongue too.
Very, very good. And Nidal, when it comes to satyagraha, that word was created by Gandhi.
okay.
It was created by Gandhi in 1908. And the word simply means sat, truth, agraha, firmness in or holding firm to. So satyagraha as a word simply means holding firm to truth. But we did spend an entire session relating to satyagraha because it is complex. Holding firm to the truth as you see it at any point in time. Always being open to hearing new truths, being willing to change what your view of truth is, and then you hold firm to a new vision of truth. You see? There's a dynamic in satyagraha. And satyagraha, of course, was Gandhi's term for nonviolent resistance, for his action approach to confront oppressive circumstances. It was his nonviolent action approach to bringing about change.
See, if you are looking into the history, from September 11, 1906, even though Gandhi was not using the word satyagraha, we can say its origin from 1906 September 11 Jewish meeting. But when he was using wrote the Hinsaraj, the original one, he was using the term satyagraha. But the English one, he was using the term passive resistance.
This was a period of transition for Gandhi in South Africa. Passive resistance was his most frequently used term early in the movement for liberation against the racial laws of South Africa. He then had a little contest trying to come up with a better term than passive resistance. Among the suggestions was duragraha, which was mentioned by M.S. John yesterday. Duragraha is Gandhi translated as basically stubborn persistence, holding firm to what you believe. But there was no implication in duragraha that there's a dynamic, that you are a learning person, that you're able to change. So for Gandhi, duragraha was not exactly a form of satyagraha. I think that was something I would have disagreed with a little bit from yesterday. He didn't use duragraha to describe his own approach after he created the word satyagraha. Holding firm to the truth as you see it is the first obligation of Gandhi. Practicing nonviolence as the only means for seeking improved visions of truth. So we spent time looking at Gandhi's worldview, and I hope that you can begin to see how it is an integrated worldview. I don't want to repeat too much from earlier sessions, but it is good for us to be clear as we move forward. Sometimes satyagraha is described as soul force, but that is not a translation. That is simply what might be, from Gandhi's point of view, generated as a result of your holding firm to the truth as you see it, actively opposing the oppressive actions of other people. You may develop soul force to the extent that you are practicing nonviolence, non-injury, ahimsa. Many of Gandhi's terms, of course, are Indian. And I'm hoping that if any of that is confusing, we can certainly do some time to review.
Thank you. That was clear
You're
now.
welcome. That's good enough for now. Very good. Okay, well, let us say that Gandhi is a complex thinker, and I've tried to spend in this past month effort to help you understand the complexity. It might be good to pull back and to look at it from a more simple point of view. The Gandhian approach to social change includes so many components, but satyagraha is one of them, and it has probably influenced a great many people in history. They've been inspired not so much by Gandhi's worldview, but by his results, what he has managed to accomplish in undertaking these nonviolent actions. So let us get some flavor for impact outside of India. Tomorrow we'll come back to India, and Sibby Joseph will be particularly helpful, I think, as we look in some detail as to the impacts of Gandhi in India. But beyond India, where Gandhi is mostly an inspiration by his lifestyle and by the results that his actions produced, we have a number of people that I will simply highlight, and there will be many more if you like. I'm hoping you may learn something a little new. I'll share relating to at least people from 5 different countries who have been influenced by Gandhi since 1948. I will highlight some of the literary impacts, perhaps 5 more people. And then we can look at what I believe is his greatest impact, and that would probably be in the global green environmental movement, which embodies a tremendous number of Gandhi's basic principles. So first, 5 people outside of India that have been impacted. So many. I would include, for example, not in this, but certainly Martin Luther King, who we'll spend a month on beginning next week. But Martin Luther King was, by his own admission, influenced heavily by the success of the Salt March of 1930. In his first book, Martin Luther King wrote A Pilgrimage to Nonviolence. It was part of a chapter in his Stride Toward Freedom book. He writes in his Pilgrimage to Nonviolence that Gandhi showed the world that the Sermon on the Mount, turning the other cheek and nonviolent resistance, could be applied on a mass scale. And that's what influenced King most. As we'll see, King didn't study Gandhi. He didn't know much about Gandhi, but he was influenced by 100,000 people going to jail in 1 year, the greatest civil disobedience campaign in the history of the world, 1930, the Salt March, the Salt Satyagraha. So King was certainly influenced heavily. Other people, I'll mention only one other in the United States. There are so many. But Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day was the founder of the Catholic worker movement, which began in 1932. Notice the timing. The Salt March, 1930, Dorothy Day creating a movement in 1932 in the United States, which would be having houses of hospitality throughout the country for the then homeless and hungry people who were suffering from the Great Depression. Dorothy Day was Catholic. She was a Marxist in her youth, and she became more seriously Christian, and she saw in people like Gandhi the embodiment of Christian values. Her idea of accepting no assistance from the government, but providing food and shelter for the homeless purely on the good graces and generosity of regular people. It sounds very idealistic, but it's also very Sarvodaya. It's influenced heavily by Gandhi's view of service, the welfare of all. If you like, we can go into greater detail with Dorothy Day. Currently in the United States, there are over 400 houses of hospitality throughout the country, none of which depend upon any government spending, all of which provide services independent of the others, where the people in the house decide what service the house will provide to the community. It might be a shelter for battered women. It might be feeding 200 people a day a meal. It might be helping people who have been released from mental hospitals to have a safe place to not be abused. It's an inspiring example of what Dorothy Day described as personalism. I'll just finish by encouraging you to maybe Google and study a little about Dorothy Day. She is being considered for sainthood in the Catholic Church. She has been beatified, one step short She is in herself an extremely inspiring person. Dorothy Day, D-A-Y. Clearly, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana was influenced by Gandhi as he fought for independence for his country from the British, fighting nonviolently. Kwame Nkrumah died in 1972, but lived to see his country independent in 1957. He helped also to form the Organization for African Unity, the OAU. So he had a Pan-African view where all people on the continent needed to work together, not just for independence, but to sustain one another. Kwame Nkrumah is a tremendous inspiration to many people, even now, many years after his death. Nkrumah, N-K-R-U-M-A-H. Kwame Nkrumah. Obviously, in South Africa, Nelson Mandela was inspired by Gandhi. I'm hearing an echo of myself, but that's okay. Many of you know more about Nelson Mandela than perhaps I do. Of course, he was very active with the African National Congress, whose name was inspired by, of course, the Indian and the Natal Indian Congress Party. So he was familiar with Gandhi. After Gandhi left the country of South Africa in 1915, the ANC began to fight for the liberation of Black South Africans. Nelson Mandela was among those leaders who accepted Gandhi's nonviolence as a strategy, not so much a matter of principle. And when there was the Sharpeville massacre of the white supremacists in South Africa, killing many Black demonstrators who were peacefully demonstrating, this happened in 1961, the African National Congress then adopted more of a policy of armed resistance, believing that nonviolence had not been successful. To those of you who are listening, that the spirit of Gandhi would say, when repression happens, that is a sign of success. That is precisely when you do not change tactics. The power structure is being threatened. That is why they attacked the protesters at Sharpeville. But the ANC went a different direction. Nelson Mandela was arrested and spent 27 years in prison. Of course, we all know that Nelson Mandela had a lot of time to reflect in prison and became a peacemaker, amazing peacemaker, upon his release from prison, and is becoming the first Black South African president. Nelson Mandela and his Reconciliation Commission, after the throwing off of white supremacy rule, is an inspiration to many people to show a way forward where people can heal from the most horrific sorts of conflicts. Many of you have never heard of Danilo Dolci. Danilo Dolci was in Italy, inspired by Gandhi. Danilo dared to confront the mafia. That's quite a dangerous opponent. On the island of Sicily, which is part of Italy, Danilo Dolci basically acted to promote water resources that would be available to the public independent. That was a risk to his life, but he was successful in doing that. He also championed something called the reverse strike. Kind of a strange concept. I think Gandhi would have been amused. Instead of refusing not to work or refusing to work, Danilo decided to refuse not to work. Sicily and many other parts of Italy needed road repairs. And when he failed to get the government to provide money to provide the road repairs, he simply organized people to do the work themselves. So he called it a reverse strike. Instead of refusing to work, he's refusing not to work, and he's rebuilding the roads and bringing pressure upon the government to provide basic services. It's a very positive addition, I think, to kind of a satyagraha approach. It was more positive than negative. The last person that I will mention to encourage you to study, and there are so many others, is a Guatemalan woman who won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1992. She is still living. Her name is Rigoberta Menchú. That is Menchu. Rigoberta Menchú is a woman of indigenous ancestry in Guatemala. She is of the Aztec culture. Over 60% of the population of Guatemalan is indigenous. Not all speak Spanish. Of course, the Spanish came and they conquered that area. And if you fast forward not too far, Guatemala had a functioning democracy for many years after the Spanish left in the 1820s. Something very, very sad happened to that democracy. In 1954, the United States overthrew the democracy in Guatemala through a CIA and coordinated economic campaign. The person who was then the president of Guatemala, and this was a person right about the time Rigoberta Menchú was born in 1959. The elected leader was a man by the name of Arbenz, and Arbenz was a socialist and sought to redistribute land from a very small number of families to most of the indigenous people. I don't want to go too crazy about this, but be aware that when the leader of Guatemala offered to buy United Fruit Company Corporation land at the value that the land had been made for tax purposes, which was almost nothing. Well, the United Fruit Company and other multinational corporations turned to the United States and said, "The man's a communist. He's a communist." And the Eisenhower administration installed a military dictator to protect United Fruit Company interests. That dictatorship, through Armas was the dictator, continued for too many years. He died. A civil war broke out in 1960. And that civil war went for 36 years, with the United States supporting a series of military dictators, which killed over 1 million Guatemalans. Most people don't know about that. Rigoberta Menchú was an advocate for the indigenous people who actively opposed by the United States. She was inspired by Gandhi to hold firm to nonviolence. She did not turn to armed struggle. And eventually, democracy was returned to Guatemala in 1996. And they have been able to maintain some progress since then through the efforts of this wonderful woman and others. So you can see that Gandhi in the United States, in Ghana, in South Africa, in Guatemala, in Italy, has inspired people all over the world. Let us, are there any questions about that? If you'd like to discuss any of those people a little bit more. We can do that. Several people, of course, came back from India who had known Gandhi. Richard Gregg was one of them. Richard Gregg was an American who had become a friend to Gandhi and had visited India many times in the 1930s and 40s. He wrote a classic book in 1934 called The Power of Nonviolence. Richard Gregg, G-R-E-G-G, The Power of Nonviolence was republished in 1944, republished in 1959, and reread by me when I was a young man in 1971. And let's just say that Richard Gregg holds a very special place in my heart, not only the influence of his book, The Power of Nonviolence, but also him personally. Here was a man inspired by Gandhi who was a unique, many ways, servant of humanity. As a young man at age 21, I had received a grant to study in India. But I knew no one. I had no contacts. And I had read this book, and I wrote a letter to Richard Gregg. And Richard Gregg wrote back saying, here is the address for the Gandhi Peace Foundation in India. Please tell Sri Radhakrishna that I have introduced you to him. Study of Gandhi in India. Well, that wasn't the only thing about the letter. Richard Gregg wrote that letter, dictating it to his wife, because, as he said in the letter, I have Parkinson's disease and I can no longer write. He was writing to a total stranger, unable to write, giving the words to his wife to put on letterhead, letting me know how I could begin my study of Gandhi in India. Richard Gregg is not a famous person. He is no Martin Luther King or Kwame Nkrumah. He is no Nelson Mandela. But he is an example of a person who, committed to nonviolence himself, was committed to helping any person, no matter how small they may be, in their journey towards nonviolence. Joan Bondurant had met Gandhi in India. Joan Bondurant came back to the United States and later wrote the book, The Conquest of Violence. The Conquest of Violence is a series of case studies that include the Vicomte Temple Road Satyagraha, which is how I learned about Vaikom, Temple Road. So again, there is a rippling effect into the future of Gandhi influencing authors, in this case, Richard Gregg, Joan Bondurant, E.F. Schumacher, the British thinker, economist who wrote Small is Beautiful, Erik Erikson, the German psychotherapist and psychologist who wrote Gandhi's Truth. A series of people have been influenced by Gandhi to write highly influential books. Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher, The Power of Nonviolence by Richard Gregg, The Conquest of Violence by Joan Bondurant, Gandhi's Truth by Erik Erikson. People on different continents, again, promoting Gandhi's thinking through writing. Now, as we try to wrap up a little bit of this impact through history, and there's so many other people that, of course, were influenced by Gandhi. Gosh. The global green movement deserves, in my view, to be having some focus. Gandhi was an environmentalist without ever calling himself an environmentalist. We have looked over his worldview and his concepts of Swadeshi, Swaraj, all see the world as a interconnected whole, where any one person or group impacts all other people and groups. Gandhi himself personally would not even waste a single tiny little pencil. I remember hearing Arun Gandhi, a grandson to Mahatma Gandhi, tell a story about how his grandfather had made him look for a small piece of pencil in the dark because he had thrown the pencil away, and Gandhi and had asked Gandhi for another pencil, and Gandhi said, "Well, Arun, where is your old pencil? It was not finished." And, "Well, I threw it away." "Well, you go out. Here's a torch. Here's a flashlight. You find it." He made his grandson go out and find the pencil lead, because that is waste. You do not, it's not littering. It's a matter of making maximum use of whatever resources you have and to wasting nothing. Recycling everything. You must live simply that the world made. So this idea of Gandhi's values influencing was certainly present in the founding of the first Green Party in 1967 in New Zealand. It wasn't even called the Green Party, it was called the Values Party, 1967. This is the new wave of the environmental movement worldwide. That wave had begun by the publishing of a book called Silent Spring by Rachel Carson in 1962. She had exposed how the chemical DDT, which was a miracle spray to kill mosquitoes and perhaps reduce malaria, also poisoned the environment and was killing many animals, including bald eagles in the United States. And that shocked many people into a new awareness of ecological concerns. The Values Party was, in 1967, against nuclear testing in the South Pacific. Again, US and French nuclear testing. Clearly, Gandhi would have been opposed to that, and the Values Party explicitly wanted to make New Zealand as a country nuclear free. And I might add, they succeeded. The United States Navy cannot make port in New Zealand even today. It is the policy of the United States Navy to not disclose whether nuclear weapons may be on board a naval vessel. And the New Zealand government, inspired by the Values Party, said that no Navy ship from any country can come to New Zealand if it has nuclear weapons on board. And if you do not tell us if you have nuclear weapons, then you cannot come. This is the beginning of the Green Party movement, part of the global green movement. This continued. Today, there are over 90 green parties throughout the world. Almost half the countries of the world have a green party. The green movement is more widespread than that. Among the first parties to win election success, the Green Party, the first to actually call itself green, in Germany in 1980. The German Green Party managed to get 5% of the vote in 1980, which gave them representation in the Bundestag, the People's House, you might say, similar to the House of Representatives in the United States. Look at the Green Party of Germany's 4 pillars, which have inspired Green Party and Green Movement actions throughout the world. The 4 pillars are participatory democracy, ecology ethic, nonviolence ethic, and social responsibility. If we look at these 4 pillars with care, we can see Gandhi. Participatory democracy, decentralized power, is key to the Green Party movement. Of course, for Gandhi, this is village rule. This is Gram Swaraj. This is Swadeshi, ruling yourself in the village level and then having decentralized power that percolates up. That element of the Green Party actually appeals to people who are wanting to decentralize power, which would include some anarchists and people who are anti-statist. So in the Green movement in Germany, people who had not been involved in politics at all were attracted to this Gandhian idea of participatory democracy at the grassroots level, and they became known as Fundy Greens or fundamental Greens. The ecology ethic pillar is clearly present with Gandhi. You so live as you would have the entire world live. You live simply to allow others to simply live. You don't even waste a little small leftover of a pencil lead. The ecology ethic appeals, of course, to many people across the spectrum, including traditional conservatives in Germany, because in 1980, the Black Forest of Germany was in severe stress due to ecological damage. And the traditional party of the Conservative Party wanted to save the forest. They often they came to be involved in the Green Party. Not all conservatives, but a segment of them became green, and they were known as Green Greens. The nonviolence ethic pillar is obviously Gandhi. And these people became known as Peace Greens. They were attracted to the Green Party because of its pledge to reduce military spending, to provide security through other means like education and healthcare, and to not be involved in wars abroad. Some of the peace Greens were pacifists, opposed to all killing of human beings, but many simply believed in a small military, reducing the military spending and presence. And the last pillar, social responsibility, of course, is Swadeshi. For Gandhi, this is you are your brother and sister's keeper. And for what are known as red greens, often attracting support for the Green Party from the left, social responsibility includes, in Germany, a national healthcare system, education, generally free through college for those who are qualified to attend. I'm mentioning these pillars because, to me, they are very clearly all rooted in Gandhi, even if it wasn't Gandhi who inspired the Greens. Many were inspired by Gandhi, but many had never heard of him. The principles were there. Oftentimes, the rippling effect does not include the name of the person, but the ideas that the person promoted. In the United States, we have had a Green Party since 1984. We've had a Green Party in my state of Oregon since 1992. I know because I helped to found it. There have been presidential candidates running every year since 1984. And for your information, the most recent presidential candidates in the 2024 election were Jill Stein and Butch Ware. Who cares? Well, this gives you some idea. They reflect the four pillars. The Green Party ran a woman for president. That wasn't the first time. Jill Stein is the first Jewish woman ever to be running for president of the United States. She's a medical doctor from Massachusetts. And she is anti-Zionist and was extremely critical of Israel's war in Palestine. Her running mate was a Muslim. You can see the influence of Gandhi here. The US Green Party selected a Jewish person for president and a Muslim for vice president. Jews and Muslims can live together. They can work together. And Butch Ware is an associate professor at the University of Michigan, who is a specialist in West African history. Butch Ware is a young man, and of course, the Greens often appeal to the young. I'm going to finish within 6 minutes, but I would like you to be aware that Gandhi's influence throughout history outside of India has been very extensive. The Green New Deal, which advocates the four pillars and promotes nonviolence and a reduction of military spending and non-intervention in other countries abroad. The Green New Deal was an idea of Jill Stein, the presidential candidate, some 8 years ago. And it is influential still to bring about radical changes in U.S. economic and environmental policies. Obviously, Mr. Trump is ignoring this. Equally obvious to me is that there is widespread resistance to Mr. Trump. The Green Party activists and other environmentalists in the United States are assertively organizing at the grassroots level to oppose these changes in Mr. Trump's environmental assault upon the U.S. Way of our entire commitment to the world is being assaulted by Mr. Trump. So at this point, let us depart from my monologue. I have mentioned 5 people. I have mentioned 5 authors. I have mentioned the global green movement and Green Party, all as being influenced by Mohandas Gandhi. What would you like to discuss? Tomorrow, we will focus on India, the legacy in India. Nidal, would you like to unmute? Hello? Would anyone like to share?
I would like to add few things to the discussion.
Please.
I would like to add the name of Cesar Chavez,
Of course.
the Mexican-American trade unionist. And also, you have mentioned about Danilo Dorsey. Along with Danilo Dorsey, I would like to add the name of Lanza Del Vasto. He also happened to be from Italy, even though his main work was in France, was responsible for the establishment of communities of art throughout the Europe and other parts of the globe. That was the result of the historic meeting of Gandhi and Lanza Del in January 1937 at Sevagram, Varda.
These are excellent, of course, people for us to focus on as you like. I never met Cesar Chavez. He died in 1993, but I was influenced by Cesar Chavez as he organized farm workers in California and elsewhere who had no unions. They were exploited workers, oftentimes not even covered with a minimum wage. In the United States, the first minimum wage was established in 1935 and excluded farm workers. So farm workers had no minimum that you could pay. Cesar Chavez organized in the fields of California a union called the United Farm Workers Union, and he organized consumer boycotts of things like table grapes and lettuce, and brought pressure upon very, very powerful growers to negotiate labor agreements with their workers. Cesar Chavez worked hand in hand with a woman by the name of Dolores Huerta. I do know Dolores Huerta, and she is also a very inspiring person. They went to jail many times, arrested locally for protesting, exercising their freedom of speech. They oftentimes were able to be released from prison because we do have a constitution that supposedly protects freedom of speech. Lanza Del Vasto was more of an organizer of communities, which is very important. In some ways, that's like Dorothy Day. Though Dorothy Day's communities, her hospitality houses were directly to service the poor in their neighborhoods. They were not so much places of meditation and study as places where action or karma would be undertaken. Thank you, Sibi.
If somebody is interested in knowing about Lanza del Vasto, if you Google it with my name, Sibi K. Joseph, and Lanza del Vasto, at least 3 or 4 publications, mainly from Gandhi International France and Sevagram Ashram. The most recent one, 2023 book, Ashrams of Gandhi and Lanza del Vasto, which was released when Professor Michael was in India at Sevagram. Another book which I wrote is Lanza del Vasto, The Messenger of Peace. Those who are interested, they can know, Google it and find it out. If you want, I can also send a link. Not at the moment because I have severe connectivity issues for a couple of days.
Indeed. I mean, it's hard.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been having connectivity issues too. In this small town where I have moved near the ocean, we don't have fiber optics, only copper wire for our connectivity, and it's not too dependable. I think the influence of Gandhi is so widespread that it is hard to claim it being very great on any particular person, but he contributed to kind of a respect for the world's religions and for different cultural traditions and a practice of nonviolence. One person, I think, who was indirectly, of course, influenced would be Pope John the 12th. Before Pope John, and he was 2 to 65, a mere 3 years. But before Pope John, many in the Catholic Church would preach that Muslims are going to hell, Buddhists are going to hell, Marxists are going to hell. If you're not, most Protestants are going to hell. You need to be a Catholic Christian in order to find salvation. Not all Catholics believe that, but it was a dominant perspective, and intermarriage between Catholic and non-Catholic people was strongly discouraged. Pope John the 12th brought in a new era of respect for other religious traditions and was very ecumenical. He opened the doors, for example, to interfaith marriages. I would not have married my wife, likely, who is Catholic, if it had not been for changes undertaken by Pope John the 12th to allow for Catholic and non-Catholic marriages. I personally believe that Gandhi and others contributed to that change of culture. It's very difficult for anyone to believe that Gandhi is going to hell. He was far too good a Christian for that. He was inspired by Jesus, among others. And so the influence of Gandhi is extremely widespread, even if the understanding of Gandhi's worldview and his values is often very superficial. I think that this course is partly an attempt to have you understand Gandhi at a greater depth than most people currently alive.
Michael, I have a question.
Yes.
Can I?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Preserving the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi for future generations, ensuring the continued relevance of Gandhi and his peace mission. What's the best way to educate young students about the Gandhi and his nonviolence?
Well, young students probably need to be encouraged to be aware of his life, how he, as a young student, had trouble learning multiplication, was not a good student, was thrown off a train in South Africa, led his country of India to independence from the British. This is superficial, but we, I think, need to begin with the young telling stories. And as they get older, like many of you are much more mature, they may be interested to know more about karma, the law of karma, ahimsa, non-injury, satyagraha. But you can't expect young people to be learning things at that level. There are children's books written about Gandhi. There's one paperback in the United States that you can, this designed for about age 12, 10 or 12 years old. So, and you can, of course, find such literature to promote in your schools if you like.
Have you seen in your teaching career any time uh, a curriculum about Mahatma Gandhi, a lesson about Mahatma Gandhi in US books, US government books?
Well, first, the US government doesn't produce books, but there are books that are there. You can, I hate to say this, but you can go on Amazon.com and simply find them. You know, put in the search engine Gandhi, and you'll probably find an awful lot. And I can try to look for the particular author of the children's book that I am aware of. I'll try to find that and share it with you tomorrow. In terms of curriculum, Gandhi is not taught in the United States. And so you may have to find books from other and curriculum from produced by other countries, other systems. Sibi Joseph, you may know of something in India that would be useful for children.
I can share. Even some of the NCERT publication, especially regarding peace studies, some books are very useful. I can share with the group. At the moment, I have connectivity issues, but later I will be sending to him.
Very good. We can just have it in the WhatsApp group. Very good.
Michael, Akshay has
Yes.
a question.
Very good.
Can you share more info about houses of hospitality?
Can I share more about what?
Houses of hospitality.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see here. I'll speak of St. Francis House of Hospitality in Chicago, Illinois. It recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. It was founded by my wife, who knew Dorothy Day And Dorothy Day did some speaking engagements in Chicago, got the money, and then just whatever she got, she gave away. And she gave it to my wife to help buy this house. St. Francis House of Hospitality is a large house that can accommodate 12 to 15 people overnight. And it has served in that neighborhood of uptown Chicago people who were otherwise homeless, mostly people with mental health issues that were deinstitutionalized and threw out onto the streets in the 1980s by Ronald Reagan, who cut health care for the mentally ill. So that is one example. Before I met my wife, I was volunteering at a house in Bloomington, Illinois, that was helping provide services to battered women who had been attacked by their husbands. Again, this was not a state or local funded operation. It was not government. It was people. I volunteered for 3 years, once a week, every week, to help provide stability to that house in Bloomington. I met many women who had been abused and listened to their stories, and many were able to stabilize and then go out in their own to find housing. There's an example of the network in relation to my experience. That house in Bloomington, Illinois, at one point had a very, very angry former husband. His wife, his ex-wife, was at the house being protected from him, and he set a fire on the house to burn it down. We called the fire department. That it was able to be put out, but extensive damage was done to the house. The people in that Catholic worker house sent out a message to the other 400 houses in the United States saying, we need help, we need donations of money. Within 10 days, over $50,000 had been raised. Not from government, just from people helping people. Within 3 months, the damage done by the fire to the house had been repaired. And it was again doing its service to the community. This gives you an example of this idea of Dorothy Day, that you need to serve the people in your community. You decide who needs most service. You raise the money. You do the service. Don't ask for government to do for you what you can do for others. Does that give you some idea? Sushil and others, I think the question was raised in a previous session. What about raising money? And I'm suggesting to you that Gandhi was right, Dorothy Day was right, Cesar Chavez was right, and Alonso de Vasto was right. If you are doing good work, the money will come. You're just all so inspired. I hope that you can be. These are very discouraging times. And I think it's important for us to realize that there are many inspiring people, including Gandhi, that can make us more optimistic about the future. If we do good work, it will ripple into the future. To be the change that you want to see. And it's not in our hands to know what the results will be, whether the environment will be saved in time to avoid mass species extinction. We don't know. All we can do is the best we can do. And I do believe that Gandhi is right, that nothing is impossible for God. Strange things happen. I won't call them miracles because I think that they are natural events. But people can be inspired. Nelson Mandela brought healing to South Africa. That, to me, is almost miraculous. Study the life of this man, because I think he, as president, chose to be president for all of the people of South Africa, black, white, Indian, mixed race, and he could have simply engaged in revenge on the white community, but he chose not to. Look into it. There's a film, I think it's called Invictus, which is a very good story. Morgan Freeman plays Nelson Mandela. Morgan Freeman is a great actor. And it's basically the story of the national rugby team, which was almost entirely white in South Africa. And they were hosting the World Cup of rugby. And Nelson Mandela had just become president. Nelson Mandela encouraged all of the people of South Africa to support the national team, even though it was primarily white. And as a way of bringing people together. On a personal level, Nelson Mandela kept the bodyguards of the previous president, an all-white bodyguard that could, of course, have turned upon him and he could have been killed. But he chose to keep them symbolically as a way of trusting and promoting trust with the white community. The film Invictus is a very dramatic portraying of how Mandela lived by example to heal a country severely divided. Well, I look forward to hearing more from many of you tomorrow. And tomorrow, we will be looking at Gandhi's legacy in India. We'll look at various institutions, including the Institute of Gandhian Studies in Wardha. So Sibi can tell us all about his work. There are other organizations within India that I am familiar with. And of course, we'll look at the Vinoba Bhave and the Budhan and Gramdan movements, which were inspired the Gandhian values in the 1950s and 60s. And we will also be looking at Vandana Shiva, among others, who is still living and is, to me, an inspiration for environmental food equity and ecological providing healthy, sustainable agriculture. So tomorrow, Gandhi's legacy in India. And come prepared with any questions you might have about previous sessions, because next week we start with Martin Luther King.